Hello, welcome to Wild Sun Art Studio. My name is Robinsunne, and we are here to talk about various art makings in my Nik the Booksmith Deserted Island Challenge. So, one of the things about my story on the island is that it was an island filled with flowers. So here's one kind of flower that I made. Here's another. And let's just get out our papers and start talking about things. Well, anyway, here's another one. I'm sorry, I'm being distracted or something. This one is my favorite. Can you see that there are little ties with knots and layers of papers? I'm going to show you how to make this little squish tassel thing. And the roses. I'll show you how to make, whoops, that one. And where are the roses? Roses. Where did you go? These curlicue roses. So let's start. Let's start with the curlicue roses. So the trick here, let's get this right in the middle, is we have a circle. And it doesn't have to be perfect. I don't know if you can see, but there's little kind of creases and bumps and stuff. It doesn't matter at all. So you start at the outside, and I snipped a little piece off, but it was long and pointy. And you just cut around the circle. And because the roses that I made for the book are going to be in a journal, I made the stripes very, very narrow. When I'm making roses like this, but I'm going to put them on something that I want it to really stand out, like I'm making a wreath, or I'm putting something on a mixed media canvas or something like that. Then the width of the stripes can be pretty hefty. 3 centimeters, an inch, something like that. So anyway, what you do is if you happen to have, and what did I do with it? I used to have a toothpick, but you just start rolling, and if you want to roll around a needle or a toothpick or an awl or something, but where are my fingers? There they are. So you just start rolling up, and we are going to roll all the way to the center. I'm going to try to do this really fast, and that's not actually the way I want to teach you how to do it. The deal behind a lot of the art that I make, and certainly a lot of the art that I made for this journal, is that it had lots of detail and I had to go slowly. But the thing that's nice about that is you get to think about your world, make decisions. I remember stuff that I need to do, make plans about phone calls I need to make, or stuff I need to do for the studio, or I don't know, whatever's up. And lots of times I just go to, I'm not really thinking, I just go to this quiet place where I'm making my hands make the object. Oh, something's out of whack. Oh no, it's just that one of them was really tall. A little taller than I thought. So I have this theory that because we use both of our hands to make art, we therefore use both hemispheres of our brain. There's a, I don't think it's a theory anymore. I think it's like a real thing about brain science, is that the left-hand side of our brain governs what our right hand is doing, and the right-hand side of our brain governs what our left hand is doing. That's also true with our eyes. So when we make art, we have to use both of our hands, and they have to give a lot of information. There's this little strip of nerve endings right down the middle of our brain, from the center of our forehead back to sort of right above our spine. And so the right brain will say, okay, move your left hand over here. And the right brain will like bring our hands over, and then the left brain will say, well, bring your other hand a little closer. No, closer. You have to come down here all the way to the circle, and then you push, and then you pull, and then you push. And so finally you get, down to where you're supposed to be. But that's a lot of interaction and a lot of conversation between both sides of our brain. Sorry, I'm trying to make art and talk at the same time. It's not working. But it's great because our brains, the different hemispheres, the two sides of our brain, actually kind of function in slightly different ways. They remember different things. Hold that thought. I just wound this up, and it's wound a little too tightly. I guess the other thing I could do is just cut a little more. Okay, so the hope is that it will unwind, now that we've wound it up, it will unwind to be about the size of the circle that's in the middle. So in winding, we always start from the outside and wind in towards the center. And then you let it go a little bit, and it should fill up that circle you've still got left. Now, I talked in my extremely long video about my book, which is listed below. I talked about the difference of using Fabri-Tac, which is quite a sticky, gummy glue. But it's acetone based, so it doesn't wrinkle paper. Or using a water-based glue like Elmer's. And this particular Elmer's, I tested the craft bond. This is quite a bit thicker and heavier than the glue wall. And the advantage to this is that it lets the center, the spiral, kind of shift around for a minute. And the Fabri-Tac is so gummy that kind of where you set this rose is where everything's going to stick. There's not a lot of move around ability. So there's a little puddle of glue in the middle, and I'm going to take the rose and set it down, and then you just put it on the table and kind of press the rose circles into the glued paper. And this is actually, well, it is what it is. There, now I got it. I just wanted to wind that up a little. It sort of unwound too much. So yeah, you just hold it there for a minute and it sticks. And then you have a little rose. When you turn it over, it's nice and flat, and you can glue this and then put it wherever you like. So if it's in a journal, that's how thick it is, which is not terribly thick. So that's nice. In an art journal, it's nice to have our embellishments not be really big and chunky. So there's one. So let's get, this is the paper that I used in my art journal. And what I did to make these flowers, well, first let me show you how I cut the pattern. So I cut a little square. Now let me move those papers so you can see. And this is how you do, this is a 5-point flower. You can also do this as a 4-point. I'm sure you could do it as a 6-point too. So you kind of get an idea of where the center is. You make a little crease right in the center. Now if we wanted to make fourths, we'd go to there. But we're going to back this up, make it a little bit smaller. And I've done this a bunch of times. We want the space between here and here to be exactly double the space between here and here. It's just an eyeball thing. Many is the time, like right now, when I've had to refold that. So hopefully I will fold this in half to the front and this behind it to the back. And it isn't perfect, but all the edges are pretty close. So then this pattern was just sort of a roundish shape. So we go from one side to the other, the round shape. Then we take scissors. And I'll cut right above the line so we can sort of see what we're doing here. You can make stars this way too, but instead of drawing a round shape, you do a straight line. Anyway, so there's our little flower. Oh, this is a little different. Oh, there's a little point at the top. Let's see if we can recreate the point. How did we do this? That's not really right. Oh, something like that. So what I said before was to draw this rounded, but if we want a little point at the top, and a lot of tropical flowers do that, we want to sort of do, so I'm going to cut that away. And on a paper flower this small with scissors this big, this is not an exact science. Let's open this up and see how we did. Yeah, there you get it. So we've got just a little bit of a tip. Tropical flowers are, in a lot of ways, very different than the flowers we get here in Maine. A little bit, we're all a little tighter, you know, brilliant colors, but just a little smaller, and getting down to work in Maine. And my thought about lovely flowers that I see on TV from Hawaii are the leaves, the petals are bigger and they're not always the same shape and they're amazing colors. Yeah, so anyway, so there's that. And what I did for a lot of the flowers in my journal is I just traced this. This became my template, and I often traced it on purpose, kind of wiggly and imperfectly, and lots of times I would even come, be drawing and I'd draw up on the petal. And I let that be okay. And then I would put 2 or 3 papers together behind this drawing, or I'd just, fold the paper over. But I do a bunch of these. And I would take a clip and then I'd just cut around it. And then I believe, as you saw in there, I would stack them kind of on top of each other so you could see leaves behind and leaves on top. So that is how I did those. These flowers I just glued together, and then very often I would, so there they are, and I would trace here so you could see that a little bit better. And then I would draw little pretend stamen, and what's the other word? Well, I don't know. I can't remember. I had it this morning. Little sort of, they're not seeds. They're little things in the center of a, I'm going to remember it 2 o'clock in the morning. Anyway, I would draw things in the center or little extra colors, only I only had black on the island, so I couldn't really put red rays coming out from the middle, like often happens with tropical flowers. So that's what I did for this shape. This was also, first is just my name for, this was the I used to have all kinds of words in my vocabulary, and I'm going without any words today. It was my first, it's not going to be there. So I would trace this and do the same thing with this. Again, I would glue these together and then offset it and draw sort of the outlines and then some little rays coming from the middle. And that would sort of give some dimension to the flowers. Now at home, if I was doing this, I might use, like maybe dark red underneath and then a lighter red or an orange or a yellow up above it. And I might actually cut out some of the colors kind of bursting from the center and layer that too. Like if I did red underneath and yellow on top, then I do red, little sprays of color coming from the middle. Glue all of that together. I use colored paper a lot for contrast. Or of course, if you had colored pencils, you could start goofing around with color. That would be fun. But on the island, all I had was this. So my favorite this isn't big enough. I want to do a different, let's try a third other paper. So I'm hopefully going to get close to folding this in thirds. Oh, pretty close. So on this one, this was so much fun to figure out because I was incredibly delighted with it. This is actually not a very clever way. Oh, it's easier. Yeah. it just makes it so thick once you start cutting. All those layers, makes it so thick. So we'll cut 3 separate times. So you fold it, this little square, in half and in half again, and then a third one, just like we do with the intricate paper cuts. Let me draw it first so you're not surprised when I cut. So we do that little tip on the top, the outside of the petal. So this is the center. This is the folded center. These are the open edges. So there's the tip of the outside of the petal. I'm going to belly it out and then come back in quite a lot. I'm going to cut this off mostly. Although, as I said, when I was making these for the book, I'd often leave that black line there and incorporate the black lines so that we could actually see it when it, because the background paper was this color too, and those black lines helped them be visible. So that's the shape. Now I'll cut that, well, for time and expediency. Let's see if I can do this doubled. You get a more precise cut if there's a little bit less to cut through. This is actually, it was great having this big, heavy, hefty pair of scissors. On the island, lots of times it's way easier to cut this kind of stuff. If you have a little pair of scissors, that's, you can do corners a little bit better. However, it's harder to get through many layers, and I had a big hefty pair of scissors, so I did layers on the island. Okay, so now we've got 3 of these, right? And we will layer them up. So if this is 12 o'clock and 6 o'clock, we're going to put this one about 1/3 of the way over, so about 1 o'clock. And you'll notice there's a hole, but when you put the other one, the point at about 2 o'clock. So we've got 12 o'clock, 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, 3, 4, 5, 6, sort of. I mean, don't go insane, but that helps you just sort of gauge where to put everything. So what I did with these, instead of gluing, was that I sewed them together. And as I said, I had an awl, which I sort of brought by mistake, but turned out to be quite lovely that I wasn't trying to do that with my needle. So I left some long strings, and then come back up to the surface. Then, oops, there. And I tied, it's called a surgeon's knot. So a regular knot is you make a circle and you pull, pull the threads around once, go back and put the threads in and around again. So it's kind of wrapped up a bit there. It's called a surgeon's knot, and I guess surgeons use it to make sure that when they make a stitch, it holds tight, and it really does hold pretty tight. It's cool the way it works. It wouldn't hold forever though, so I double knot it. And then I had all these lovely The other parts of a flower are like at the tip of my tongue. I can't remember what they stamens and I can't remember. Anyway, I wanted each of these little strings to have a bit of heft, to not just be floating around, and I didn't want them to come back together and be a bunch over here and a bunch over there. So I figured that if I knotted each of these strings, and again, this is art meditation, and there's no hurry, other than I don't want this video to be hours long. So I just tied little knots. So I won't do that now because tying knots is something you know how to do and we've all been there. But anyway, I love this flower. It's just so, sorry, I'm having a hard time with staying centered. This was my favorite flower. I also wanted to tell you how to do that little fits. So you take a little piece of paper. This is 8.5. I just cut a strip off of paper. It doesn't really matter. So let's go this way. So I'm cutting, as you can see, pretty close to this edge. We're going to glue everything together. So it doesn't matter how precise I am. And it doesn't matter how close I get. I mean, you would want to cut it off. But even if you did cut it off, it's fine because we're going to just glue it together. So and then you start in the middle. And roll it around in a circle. It's a little tricky because you've got all these fringes. And what I'm going to do is put just a bit, a couple of dots of glue down here so that it won't come unrolled. Once I get it all into place. I guess you don't have to do that because you can see that there's some dimension there. So when I'm all rolled up, I can also just put glue here and that'll keep it from getting unrolled. And because that flower that I showed you that had this in the middle was going to be inside the book, I wanted it to stay pretty flat. So that's why I brought the cuts pretty close to this edge, because when I open it up, I don't want it to come off the page very, very much. Okay, so I'm pressing this so that it kind of all comes together there. And give this a sec for the glue to set, but hold that, go into the middle, and push these out. Isn't it cute? And you can kind of spread them out a little bit. That works a bit. So there. So there actually is a stem to this. And if you weren't hurrying like I was, you could cut this even closer to the edge and really take your time and make sure you got everything exactly the way you wanted. But then in a flower like this, you just put a little puddle of glue and stick that in until it dries. Make sure everything's pressed down. And then you get a wonderful color splash. You might want to do a little bit bigger. So can't you imagine if you did this in maybe yellow, and then did the little flower in orange and the big flower in red, or you could do blues and lavenders with something really brilliant like one of the, lime green, you know, coming out of the middle. You could really have fun with color, which I can do now that I'm home. So these are some of the flowers in my wonderful tropical deserted island book. Have fun with this. And I will send you off with many blessings. May you have so much fun and so much art in your life. May it bring you every phenomenon of health and joy. All right, I'll see you later. Bye.